It's 20th again.
Okay. It's Christmas.
It's 20th of September. And then tomorrow,
It's 21st.
wish like that.
It's done.
Mashujaa
New
Day,
Year.
Jamhuri Day, Christmas. And like that.
You know, tomorrow is the anniversary of Westgate, yeah?
Tomorrow is Westgate anniversary.
Yeah.
Sure.
How many years?
Since 2013.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
about
what,
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
And we still don't have a full account of what happened there for 4 days. You know?
You haven't seen the account. Maybe there's a full account.
There's none, actually. They haven't given it, at least. It's not been made public.
Yes. The guests who are speaking are going to be talking to us this morning. We're looking at everything now that the Queen was buried yesterday. Now we're still coming back into, okay, what is the legacy of the British Empire and the British government in Africa and other parts of the world? Before I introduce and welcome the guests, let me tell you today's proverb. It's a Tanzanian proverb. Every bird flies with its own wings. Every bird flies with its own wings. Patrick Adhara, curator, the elephant. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation again. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Again. Say again.
Thanks for having me again.
Say again.
I'm becoming a regular now.
It's a good thing. Joel Kimtai Bosek is an advocate of the High Court. He joins us for the first time. Karibu sana, Joel.
Asante sana.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. That is the hot seat, but because Gadara is here and he's used to it, so we'll transfer the heat to him, and then we now bring it all to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready for it?
All three of us now.
Probably I have something to call it.
We'll see.
Wakili, a quick one.
Sure.
When you hear this, right? When you hear the proverb today from Tanzania, every bird flies with its own wings. What do you translate that to mean?
Oh, it can mean many things, and it can also mean that at the end of the day, flight has to be taken individually. In other words, you might not really hike a lift. And if we must do things, we must flock together. Like they say, the Englishmen say, and also women, I believe, that birds of the same feather flock together. So it means that all of them are flying, or we must have a common purpose, take a flight together, and nobody actually will give you a lift when you're flying. Yeah.
Even as we say, we are doing something collectively, we must do it individually.
That is it. At the end of the day, there's also individual responsibility. Yes.
Very well said. Very well said. Stephanie is reading a news item this morning, and even as we're talking about what happened yesterday in London and Windsor, we saw the burial of the Queen. There's also the issue of the atrocities that are committed by the British government in colonial era Kenya. And we have seen those cases taken to court. The Mau Mau have taken cases to court. Now we are seeing members of the is it Kipsigis community?
Kipsigis and the Talai.
And the Talai.
Yes.
Now also raising issues. You're involved in this particular case, Wakili.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Yes, this is a case that we are suing the British government, that is the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And we decided to take the case to the European Court of Human Rights, because we believe that is where our matters will be best addressed, as opposed to taking it to the High Court in England, in London in particular, because of a number of logistical issues, which we felt that if we are to file it there, then it could have not seen the light of the day.
Like which ones?
Number one, English has this very interesting mentality that even if you wrong 100 people, you should be very careful to admit that you have wronged them. Because if one of them was to sue you and you admit and you pay reparation or compensation, then it will open what is called the floodgates. But of course, this is something that is backdated, this is outdated, this is something that does not hold. If you wrong 100 people, you should be prepared to address all those wrongs. like what you have said about the methali ya Kiswahili from Tanzania, you should be prepared to address every issue. So they've been telling us that, look here, guys, we compensated the Mau Mau, and as far as we are concerned, we have sorted out all those issues. Can you imagine? Yeah. Somebody telling you that in English, in a language you understand.
One can hope.
The Mau Mau issues arose in 1952. Our issues started from 1902 all the way to 1963. Yeah, so we are saying Mau Mau was just a figment. And ours is a case where there's been a lot of massive dispossession. If you talk about the tea estates in Kericho, you actually get shocked that all those farms were owned by the Kipsigis and the Talai, but they were taken away from them forcefully. There was no negotiation, there was burning of houses, there was torture, there was rape, there was confiscation of livestock, and so many other things that took place. And the survivors of those atrocities are still alive, and they are the ones who have gone to court to tell the world the story about the British dispossession. One funny and interesting thing about British is that they can steal from you even when you are seeing. I mean, that's robbery, isn't
With
it?
your eyes wide open.
Yes. They steal from you when you are stealing, when you are seeing it.
You know, on the case of the Mau Mau, we have to be careful that it wasn't all the Mau Mau who were compensated. It was just a case of 5,000 of them.
Yeah.
You know, and you remember the British didn't actually even admit a responsibility for that. They were saying, actually, in fact, the argument before had been that we should compensate ourselves, that we inherited the colonial government, so therefore we are the ones who are,
Inherited.
you know.
The
I'm
government
serious, that's what they were saying.
understands
That is very
liabilities.
true. Actually,
Yeah.
the Mau Mau 2 case failed, and that one had more than 43,000 victims. But it failed because of the same argument. Number one, that when we got independence, the independent Kenyan government inherited all the atrocities that were done by the colonial government, which was actually based in London.
Yeah.
When we got independence in 1963, the 12th of December 1963, it's not a date that we chose. It's not the date that Mau Mau chose. There was a law in England, the Kenya Independence Act.
Yeah.
And that act says that from the 12th of December 1963, British government, UK government, will cease to have responsibility over Kenya. So they had responsibility up to 1963. Yes, they can't run away from that.
Yeah, that's true.
what their law says.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have to remember, I mean, given the context we are in, that in 1963, the Queen was still the head of state here. In fact, if you read Gigi Kariuki's PhD thesis, looking at how the Constitution, the Lancaster Constitution evolved, you know, he says even on 12th December 1963, Kenyatta was pretty much just an advisor to the governor. You know, till we became a republic, that entire year,
The
they
story
were
of
in
Prime
charge.
Minister.
Yeah, I mean,
just a
the
title.
British were still in charge, you know. So it's really important, I think, the point you're making, that these guys maintained responsibility, you know, and that comes with its consequence, that they shouldn't be allowed to run away from it.
Even before we look at the issues and how then the process will play out in terms of court in London. Now, one would believe that if you're getting into a case like this, that there must be then even acknowledgement of an issue. So the Mau Mau issue was brought, some 5,000 compensated. Not all the Mau Mau were obviously. There's some, I believe there's a famous story of one woman. I don't know if she's deceased now, but she was very elderly, and she wrote to the Queen, I believe it was early this year, and said, look, my legs were basically chopped, injured, because of what you people did here. I'm still looking for compensation. So those stories are rife.
Sure.
This is now an addition, something new that is coming up. I believe fundamentally there must be at least an acknowledgement of these what we are calling wrongs that were done upon the Kenyan people. Does that exist? Is there such that somebody has even answered and said, all right, let's even begin to look into this? Has that occurred?
That has never happened, and that is what we've been asking for. And even as you speak about that elderly Shosho who has been making such kind of requests, I have a client by the name of Mzee Arap Ngasura, who is a Talai. She's the only one who is surviving the mass exodus, the forceful eviction of the Talai from Kericho to Kwasi, which was done in 1934. That Mzee wish is that one time the British will actually call him so that he can apologize on behalf of the Talais. He believes that the reason why God is still keeping him alive is because he'll be the one to go
To
on
receive.
record to forgive the British for what they did.
Okay.
Because we are talking of somebody who was born and who has not enjoyed his life. We are talking of somebody who was probably 6 years older than the Queen. The Queen has had all the luxuries a human being can ever have in this
And
world.
then some.
But then this Mzee has been denied his godly human rights privileges that are inalienable. So you see that kind of paradox, where somebody else has denied others their full life in this God-given life. Yeah, and then it's not something that we can wish it away. It's something that we must face it. It's something that we must address it. It's something that we must sit around the table and be very candid about it.
Give us this story of Mzee Arap Ngasura as a case study. What is this that happened to him and his people? This eviction from Kericho.
Remember,
What happened?
Remember the Talais or the Libons is a special clan among the Kalenjin. It came from the Maasais, although they trace their origin to Ethiopia, but they came from Nandi to Kipsigis, and because they are not only warlike, but they had the gift, it was believed that they had the gift of prophecies. So the British did not like them because with the Kipsigis, I'm a Kipsigis myself, we treated them as our kings. We respected them. We gave them all the honor. And obviously the British administration was not very careful. We are not very happy about it.
So they were the influencers.
Influencers, and not only that, because they were seeing another center of power.
Right.
Yes. No sovereign will ever tolerate another center of power. So they felt that these people must be removed from the Kipsigis. And they came up with all manner of propaganda, what we knew to be prophecies. They say this is, they are witch doctors, and they are naturally witch doctors, that they are people who are born witches. So that kind of propaganda, and unfortunately, there are some people who still believe it after today, which is really a very retrogressive thing, because if they were witch doctors, the people who they should have bewitched first and foremost should have been the Queen and everybody else.
If it really worked.
What is this witchcraft that can affect only Africans?
So what happened? So they were removed. How were they removed?
They were removed forcefully from Kericho. You know, Kericho is an island, very cool climate, to a place called Kwasi. Kwasi is in Homa Bay and Migori. The condition there was very hostile. The climate is not one that people can easily survive. That's why in the first 3 years, there was 100% abortion. All the women who conceived had miscarriages. They lost all their animals because they went with the animals. It was an exodus. It was almost like that one of Moses, only that this one was inspired by human beings. And this was meant to kill other human beings. And then in Kwasi, Kwasi was like an open prison, like Siberia in history. If you remember the Russian history, where if you are on the wrong side of government, they'll just punish you to Siberia, a very cold place. So actually, these people were being put into an open prison because the reason why I'm saying it was a prison, every year they'll do a census. We know very well that internationally, the practice is that every 10 years census is done.
Yeah.
But for the Talai, it was every year. And then census is always done so that you can provide services like education, health, and so forth. But for the Talai, they were denied all those, so that you find generation of Talais who are having physical challenges, like because there were no hospitals, many children had polio, and many people have lived with polio, others with blindness, and so many other stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this case and I'm looking at then where all of this is going to go. And what you've described so far is life-changing stuff. The people who born and never had a chance. And then one would be able to link it directly to what happened as a result of the, I think, even more than colonization of the British and the ways in which they were treated before the years of independence. So what is being sought with these cases? What is being sought? And then as you answer that, is it enough that would then be able to say, all right, since that you've done this, whether it is monetary compensation, whether it is a public recognition and apology thereof of what was done, is it enough, or is it at least, my father used to say that, give us this proverb that a rat will bite your toes and then blow to make it feel a little better. Is that what you're looking for? What exactly is the ask?
What the victims are looking for is first and foremost that there should be acknowledgement that they were wronged. There should be an apology from the British monarch that what was done against them was not right and that they deserve to be treated as human beings. Then obviously there should also be some form of compensation. And we are not saying that we are looking at very ridiculous figures. But now that we are in court, we are obliged to put on the table before the court everything that we feel that should be considered during the calculation for compensation. Yes. But were it to be an outside court settlement, then obviously there will be like a process of give and take.
I don't get why we sort of minimize what we should ask for. I mean, these guys have done really.
This is what I'm asking.
I mean, in the US today,
Yes.
they are holding $3.5 billion of Afghanistan's money and saying they're going to give it to relatives of victims of 9/11. You know, 3.5 billion, that's a huge, huge
they're
amount.
going to give it to
You know,
Americans.
yes, they're going to give it to Americans.
That's about 400 billion.
You know,
shillings.
in
A unilateral decision, basically.
yeah, exactly. So if you look at what the families of Lockerbie were given, you know, these are massive amounts. Why is it that African lives are somehow lesser? That 5,000 people, guys were given £20,000 and they're supposed to be happy with that.
Actually, it was 30 million sterling pounds to be divided into 5,000 victims.
You know, yeah. I mean, it's a tiny whatever amount. So I don't think we should minimize the thing. And the other issue that I wanted to raise when it comes to acknowledgements.
Sure.
Acknowledgements isn't simply saying, yes, we did this. At independence, these guys stole a bunch of documents, you know, from Kenya and repatriated it to the UK and lied actually till the Mau Mau case, you know. They lied that they had these documents. They lied to their own courts, you know, that they had them. They were destroying them as recently as in the 1980s. You know, huge caches of documents that detail all of these things people are alleging happened.
Sure.
You know, and for a long time they denied. So they denied they were running torture camps here in Kenya, you know, for a long time, till we actually got those documents, you know, in their own right now. This is what they were doing, you know. Those documents still today remain in the UK.
Actually, what you're very right. What
They
you're
haven't
saying
been repatriated here. So we are reading books like Karen Elkin's book, whatever, The British Gulag, David Anderson, Histories of the Hanged. You know, all of these books, based on those documents, are being written by people who can make it there. You know, they should be here with us so we can write our own histories. You know, so acknowledgement isn't just them saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry we did that." It's actually going much, much further and ensuring that first that archive is repatriated back, it's brought here. and then we actually have a sensible discussion about compensation, because we have families still today that are suffering from the effects of what those guys did, and it's not just the Talais across the country.
Okay, so coming off of what you've just said, Bosek and Patrick, I've seen a comment here, and it's not the first time that I've heard that being said. Look, these are things that happened,
60 plus,
60, I mean,
going
good
into
heaven.
80.
It happened long
100.
ago. These fellas, they've gone back to the UK, but is now in their place. And now it's our own governance and way of life is now upon us. Can we not just forgive and move on? Lawyers trying to make money from these, what would be global class action kind of thing. Can't we just forgive these people? We know they came, they did wrong. It's okay, we understand. It's an argument that is held by very, very many people.
Okay,
What would you say to that?
Let me say this. First of all, what my brother has said here is very true. I've had the privilege of going to the Kew Gardens Royal Archives in London, and what you are saying is very true. One thing that I don't know whether to appreciate with the white people is that they don't know how to lie. And there's this thing that when you put everything in black and white in my book, you actually you have hidden it from an African. Then an African will not read. An African will not do research. Those things that you are saying about atrocities, they were being done with impunity. They never knew that we will be one time independent. They never knew that at one time we'll be taking their government to any court in this world. I mean, everything was being done the way you probably can do with your goats. I mean, you are not responsible.
You never think that your goat is going to wake up one morning and ask you, "Good morning, Bosek, how are you?"
That is it.
Right.
Yes. So, and then the reason why we cannot forget it is because it's part of our history. The other reason is people are still hurting. You go to Kericho, and Kericho is actually like an apartheid state. I normally say apartheid started in Kericho, but it was perfected in South Africa. You'll find one place where it's only whites, the tea estates. You don't find any African, any black people, any black person on the land. Today. Then the other side was created as what is called a native reserve. You've heard of people saying the sharks, Shago, reserve. Reserve was number 2 after the game reserves belonging to wild animals. So the second in that order was the poor African person.
Good Lord.
So when you still have all those kind of stuff, when you still have British multinational tea companies raking billions of Kenya shillings in terms of profits every year, not dropping a cent for the benefit of the local people, it's very hard to talk about this thing called forgetting and moving on. People are now living in cramped parcels of land, 1 acre accommodating, let's say, 10 families. And yet there is land that belongs to their grandfather, which could have accommodated all of them. But we are not saying that people should go back to that land. We are saying people should benefit from their resources. Yeah.
When you talk about land,
yes.
then it also brings in that other conversation about whose responsibility is it. At that point of independence, was there a conversation about land redistribution among the Africans? And why did it not happen?
Okay, I believe that you've asked your question. Sorry for interjecting. Number one, land issues has remained very elusive and emotive until the other day when we came with this new constitution of 2010. And I must applaud the work of the National Land Commission. For the Kipsis and the Talai, we went to the National Land Commission and they gave an award. They say actually this land should have been surrendered at independence. Independence was about surrender this land to the people.
Yep.
But that was not done. There was a lot of compromise. You mentioned about, is it JM Karaoke?
No, that's Gigi Karaoke.
Oh, Gigi Karaoke, yes. JM Karaoke, when you look at history and if we head our way, probably that should have been actually the president of this country, even maybe for 2 years or 3 years. Because he seemed to have had the right agenda for the people of Kenya. Number one, why create an island of 10 millionaires amidst 10 poor
Million
people,
beggars.
10 million beggars. It can't work. So that when we got independence, the land that belongs to the white settlers, many of people, allies that time, took it away. There was a revolving fund given by the British government, and let me be very clear about this. This revolving fund of 100 million sterling pounds was not meant for compensation. Let that be very clear. It was meant to assist any African who wanted to buy land to be given some form of loan to pay for the white settler who was not comfortable staying in Kenya. Actually, the beneficiary was supposed to be the white settler. And then I must also say this. Our historians have failed us. The kind of history we are reading in Kenya is more of propaganda, but not real history. Those white farmers who are compensated, they were given a lot of money, not compensation. Actually, when you are buying land, you are, the white settler, because they did not want to be ruled by a black president or a regime of black people, the place that was very enticing and like they really wanted to go was Southern Rhodesia, that is Zimbabwe. So that if you sow land in Kenya, you'll get 5 times the price in Zimbabwe.
Hey.
So most of them actually went to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
In Kenya, we lost 6,750,000 acres of land to the white settlers. When we got independence, Zimbabwe had lost 17 million. But from our independence to Zimbabwe's independence, they lost another 18 million acres. So that means that the loot they got from Kenya in form of
They
selling,
went and reinvested.
they went and invested. And
terms of-
if you are selling 10 acres in Kenya, 1,000 acres in Kenya, you are able to buy 5,000 acres in Zimbabwe. Yes. So all these things were meant to benefit the white race.
So it was basically compensation for them.
It was compensation for the whites, but for the Africans, it was a way of you must still pay for this land that you
That we are giving back to
are
you.
giving back. But then the white people who got land initially in Kenya, they were given for free, and the Africans who owned the land were not compensated. Yes.
They had to buy. Let's take a break and continue the conversation.
Yeah.
We are talking about the what we saw as the brutal legacy of Britain in Kenya. Joel Kimutai Bosek is an advocate of the High Court. He is representing the Kipsigis and the Talai in a case before the European Court of Human Rights, and is saying these two communities suffered great atrocities in the hands of the British, and they ought to be recognized, compensated, and apologized to. Those three. I've summed it up rightly, right? Yes. Patrick Adara is a man who talks about all these things. He says, in fact, even the system that we have now.
Imetoka kwao.
This is this system. Okay, let's take a break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We are talking about the atrocities committed by the British in Kenya before independence, and even after independence, in many cases. So you're representing the Kipsigis and the Talai in this particular case, European Court of Human Rights, and somebody has been asking, since the death of Queen Elizabeth II, these issues came up. Why are we mourning the monarch who was at the helm when all these atrocities were taking place? And there's been divided, debate on. There are people who are saying, look, people, come on. It happened, we got our independence. Can we now focus on building our own state and we let go bygones be bygones? Why should it be important for us to look back into this and demand justice?
Justice is something that must be addressed for us to be able to move on. And then this is not a very unique case. Remember, even Herero people of Namibia are being compensated by the Germans. Yet the Germans were there for up to 1915. We know that. During the First World War, the Germans lost all the colonies in the world or in Africa. And the beneficiaries of the Herero resources was actually the British and the South Africans, whites. But the Germans have taken it upon themselves, not even after being prompted by anybody, to say sorry for what happened before 1910. The British are still milking. They're still exploiting resources in Kericho. And we are saying, look here, you need to compensate for what happened. We also need to have a share of this. So why should we forget when we are still hurting? It's like telling somebody who is writhing in pain to forget about the pain. I mean, it's impossible.
Is there any part of the British Empire where they've ever gotten a word like sorry for what we did?
In the Mau case, they were almost doing that.
They
but
were
let me
They express regret.
Right.
and let me also say this. They were only willing to compensate the Mau when a judge in England said that the British government must be held responsible. And they never wanted a precedent to be set. That's why they said, come on, guys, let's discuss this thing out of court.
So they settled out of court.
They were fearing a situation where a precedent is created.
Yeah, and it was actually even those very documents, the appearance of them, of what's in the Hanslope archive, that basically showed that they were complicit. And don't forget, these are documents, as I said, they had been hiding from their own courts. They were buried, basically in a bunker, stuff. And it's only when this then came to light that suddenly, they did an about turn. Now let's have a settlement. Let's express regret. We can't really apologize, but let's express regret. Stuff. And anyway, to speak to your point, I mean, I think given the case of the Herero, Germans haven't really behaved very well. I mean, they had to be really pushed to first acknowledge that there was a genocide that they committed in Namibia, and even the compensation they are giving, is a pittance compared to what they're giving, for example, for World War II victims. So, to the people who say this was long ago, by 2020, Germany had basically paid $92 billion to victims of the Holocaust. $92 billion. They are still paying till today. They are paying them stipends till today. In fact, over the coronavirus period, I think in 2020 or 2021, they came up with $700 million, to help the Holocaust survivors go through coronavirus, the COVID pandemic. And when we talk about it here, we are told, no, that is long ago. Forget about it. No, it's not long ago. Secondly, we are living with the legacy of what those guys did, till today. There has been no acknowledgement on their end that, well, actually, we did mess you guys up, and I think we really need to insist that our lives are no less important, no less valuable than the lives of people in Europe, etc. If things were switched, do you imagine the British would be saying, well, that's long ago, they chased Libya
We're all human.
for Lockerbie for how long? etc. They don't forget about that stuff.
Indeed.
So to tell us that we should forget is to simply say that our lives are somehow lesser, and I say they're not.
I'm looking at the example that you've given, Patrick, of, the victims of the Holocaust and then the compensation that Germany continues to make unto date. And I'm looking at one of the reasons for that, because, look, one of the reasons for that is that the Holocaust, in its magnitude, in terms of what happened, was made very public. Even after 1945 and the war ended, and 1946 and now people started to find their way back. And then the Nuremberg trials thereafter, it was made extremely public. The atrocities that were committed to these people were put in the public glare. Everybody knew what happened, down to the child who died, down to those who were electric. It was made public. There would have been no other way for them to hide. And I think that may be one of the things. And for me, I'm going to be very bold about this. When we say forget it and we say put it aside, what you're doing is that you're covering it up.
Yes.
You're putting a blanket on it, you're shrouding it so that it is not in the public, so that Kipsigis will not say this is what happened. You will not know what happened. You will never hear that the place was called reserve next to animals for Africans. You will never hear that happened. And so once you put it in the dark, the likelihood of anybody to feel any kind of emotion towards that and insist that something will be done then decreases significantly.
No, you're right. I think the fact is lots of this is hidden. Again, bring me back to that archive. You see, lots of these Momau people were saying that they had been tortured, they had been put in camps, they had been, put in these villages. But the British denied it.
Saying no.
Never happened. These guys are making it up till we got the archive. And that's why it's really important for us to get it back, bring it back here, because there's lots more in there where we can mine about our experiences, and we come up with a much more useful history, a much more accurate history about what happened. The second thing is on the issue of justice. Till today, you have 100-year-old guards being prosecuted, for what they did during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So a guy was a guard at
just a
Auschwitz or
guard.
whatever.
Yeah.
100 years old. They don't forget about it. We've got people who tortured people here in Kenya. Living in Kenya, living in the UK. Nobody goes after them. Nobody goes and said, well, you went and castrated somebody, which they did. You took a hot bottle and put it in a vagina of a woman, which they did.
As a matter of fact,
we are told, forget it.
As a matter of fact, hold it there.
There is
As a matter
no
of fact,
justice there.
As a matter of fact, in the Mau Mau 2 case, both the High Court of England and the Court of Appeal agreed that opening up that case will be prejudicial to the defendants, to the respondents. They are blind to the sufferings of the victims.
But yes, it would.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely, it would, and that's all right.
That's why
Exactly. But that's my point. You see, when we said, and so we've got a new president who decides is going for the Queen's funeral, fine. These are not issues he's going to raise.
That is it.
He's not going to sit with them and talk and say, well,
By the
actually,
way,
you guys behave very badly. This is something we need to discuss. We've got a British High Commissioner here. She has press conferences, etc. The media doesn't stop her and say, well, actually, your people
Now that you're
did
here.
this and this and this. etc. We need to start insisting our history matters. The things that happen to us matter.
Sure.
And I think the moment, just as you're saying, happened with the Holocaust, it could have been easily hidden away. I mean, there are genocides. You can think of the Armenian genocide, etc. That have been, that there's been attempts to hide them. Herero genocide is another one, and until we refuse to say, well, actually, no, we are not just footnotes in history. We are participants. These things happen to us and they matter. And we make sure at every place that we interact with these guys, these are issues we bring up. Give us back our documents that you stole, start compensating and in fact start prosecuting people who are, who committed crimes over here. And
then the other issue is the British are very good in investing in international diplomacy to hide their atrocities which they committed in the past. Every time this independent former British colony, they are very quick to recruit it into the so-called commonwealth.
Yep.
Which, if you were to analyze and explain what all this is all about, you probably will be, you'll just wonder, is there really what is called wealth, which is common to all of us? Is there anything that we are sharing other than having a very bad and ugly past with the British. SADC countries, the one in Southern Africa, you can actually tell that they are trying to do everything possible to bring themselves into oneness. You go to a country like South Africa, which has more advantage than the rest. They even give scholarships and treat any member from any student from the member countries like a South African when it comes to paying tuition and stuff like that. But today, you as a member of the Commonwealth, you are sending your son, your daughter to Britain. That son of yours will pay 3 times what a British student is paying. In other words, he'll pay school fees and pay for 2 other British students. So where is Commonwealth in this?
Indeed.
When our resources are being controlled by one former superpower who was controlling the region and cheating us that, oh, let's have Commonwealth games here and there. I mean, let's be serious.
I've read some of the things that you've written and also heard some of the commentary you made on dealing in governance on the continent today. I mean, not just in Africa, but dealing on the continent as former colonies of Great Britain. That has a direct impact on the governance that we see today. I don't agree that our governance today and the habitual way in which we continue to go towards underdevelopment should be blamed on the colonialists. I do, however, agree that a system that has been created came about as a result of that and those atrocities. You've made that link. How do you see that the system within which we operate today has its ties to back then?
I mean, start with the idea of countries. We didn't come together as Africans and decide to, let's segment this continent, the way it is.
Yeah.
They did. Take Kenya. Good example. They come here, they draw 41 administrative boundaries. And lo and behold, we have 42 tribes. You think that is not related to what they did? Lots of the things we are doing till today are stuff that we have borrowed. From there, you see our guys with their wigs, if you just take some of the less important issues, The
language you use.
Oh, my lord, and when you go to the Supreme Court, and those lawyers starting up with their wigs, our speaker, with his wig, where is that from? A lot of these things are not things that are for us, They were meant to, and they were created to, so we would honor the whites. We would look up to the whites.
Bang back with them.
Yeah, and when we got independence, to be quite honest, the people who got independence, the generation that got independence, had been cultured to think that actually what they really want to do is to be white. So they all moved to the places where the white people were living. They all start wearing the things the white people wear. Charles Jonjo being a very good example. And we start behaving like them. We start fighting over the titles that they had. Oh, who's going to be called Your Excellency? Who's going to be called this? So that's those are things that we have legacies to today. Think of corruption. There's a very fantastic book called Looters and Grabbers. I think it's Joe Kamisi who wrote it. And he traces corruption, and he says this idea that we've been taught that corruption came from Africans taking gifts to their chiefs. There has never been documented places where guys used to go and say, "Oh, here's my goat, let me take it to the chief." There's nothing. Corruption is a product of the colonial system. They came with it here. In fact, Delamere is quoted in that book as far back as 1908 saying, an African cannot walk outside his gate, without meeting a policeman asking him for a bribe. An Indian policeman at the time. Who brought those Indian policemen? The colonial system itself was built to steal. They created a government to allow them to steal. And then we are surprised that our government keeps stealing from us, because that was what it was made to do. That was what it was built to do. And until we recognize that, so when we had the Independence Constitution in 1963, Githumigai writes a paper in 1982, very nice, interesting paper, where he says, basically, we tried to impose a liberal constitution on an authoritarian colonial structure, administrative structure. And what happened, that structure didn't change, the constitution changed.
It's hard to.
2010, we tried the same thing. Then suddenly we are hearing BBI, let's change the constitution.
Because there's some things that
the
are not
things
working.
that are under here remain. The government remains as it stills. The policemen remain, the citizen, what did the Ransley report call them? A citizen policing. Anyway, basically they are there to protect the government from us. That's why the police. That's why the IBA created the police. That's why the colonial government, built up the police. The one there to help you and me. So all these systems are there till today. Now, I'm not saying that it's about blaming the colonialists. What I'm saying is
we need
to acknowledge this is what we got. And it's not just Kenya, across Africa. It's a problem across Africa. That we made
old enough to break it down.
Yeah, what we did is we confused two things. We confused independence, the idea of independence, with the idea of decolonization.
Right.
And we did not recognize that simply getting political independence is one thing.
Did not decolonize.
Doesn't mean you've decolonized. And that's the work of decolonize that we haven't done till today.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Your closing remarks in about 20 seconds.
Okay.
On this.
Thank you very much. I thought we'll still probably say a lot about this subject. And
we are
very grateful for having brought us here and for whatever that we've been able to discuss today, and hoping that you'll also invite us in the future.
Yes, Joel.
Yes, thank you.
As this case progresses, we want you to come back and give us updates on what's happening. In fact, if you can even link us up with some of those case studies and the stories, and tell us more, so that people, when they listen to the stories, they actually can relate. This is what this person has taken before the European Court of Human Rights. This is what we are asking for. This is what we are demanding.
Thank you.
Joel Kimutai Bosek is an advocate. He is representing the Kipsigis and the Talai in a court at the European Court of Human Rights. Patrick Adara is a curator of The Elephant. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's conversation.